running for president in a very unconventional and original sort of way that is actually for our benefit to everything. So let's take a quick question here to Tom. And let's see, get you down there in the corner in a very unconventional and original sort of way that is actually for our benefit on the audio take. So let's take a quick question here to Tom. And let's see. Tom, how does it feel to be the candidate with the most dangerous past? In fact, that kind of opens up the entire thing. Tell us a little bit about your past.
Well, you're definitely right about that. I would have to say that my past is probably the most open and honest of any of the candidates running. I have printed in my book, Adversity Builds Character, all about my life as someone who had problems with alcohol addiction, drug addiction, and sexual promiscuity. I've openly admitted that I'm gay. I've openly admitted that I am physically challenged, and I challenge any of the other candidates to be that open and honest. People can question whether or not that gives me a good character to be president, and I would offer this in response that these adversities have taught me a great deal, and they've made me a stronger person, and they have definitely reinforced what I think is an improved character. Adversities have taught me a great deal, and they've made me a stronger person.
Now, you also, in going a little bit into your background, you actually have a fairly long political career behind you already.
I do. I've worked on Capitol Hill as an intern. I've worked on 11 political campaigns on both sides of the political aisle, Democrat and Republican. My former mentors and/or bosses include a former special assistant to Ronald Reagan, the former assistant chief of staff to then Vice President George H.W. Bush, the former governor of Louisiana, Charles Buddy Romer, two former congressmen, and the recently retired U.S. Trade Ambassador Ron Kirk and former mayor of Dallas. Bush.
So you've got, yes, quite a range of people you've had experience with on that, which brings up the question of what do you think about the honesty people say they get from Donald Trump? You've had some experience around political people before, and he's certainly a major character playing in the overall arena at the moment.
I don't know that I would call it honesty, if not more demagoguery. The man is, by all character assessments, someone who is extremely, what's the term I'm looking for? He is all about Donald. And, you know, I admire the fact that he tells the American people that he's running his campaign by self-funding. But I would throw this question up to the American voters. If he's not beholden to them for their contributions, and he's only beholden to himself, in the end, who is he responsible to? If not to the American people, only to himself. And I find that extremely dangerous. I agree that he is being plain-spoken. He's being honest with his rhetoric, if not abrasive and offensive at times. However, I don't know that that's the man that we want representing the character of this country. And there is a time and a place for frankness and a lack of diplomacy, shall I say. And I do agree with there is a tone of going against political correctness, because I think we've gone too far to the other side. However, I think Donald Trump has gone way over the line, and anyone who dares criticize him or question his facts or his lack of facts is immediately crucified like any bully would. And how dare they bother to question him? And I think that is a dangerous trait to have as President of the United States. Lack of facts.
Indeed, it's certainly very focused upon him and what he's particularly interested in.
How dare they bother to question him.
Yeah,
and I think
that's
that
a
is
concern.
dangerous trait to have as
Also
president
brings
of the United
along a lot of other particular dangerous things that are going on at the moment. One of the things would be how the American drug manufacturers are been hiking up prices on things such as AIDS medication and other things like that. Want to get some of your opinion for that and kind of how that should be taken care of.
Well, I think part of the problem with that is the FDA. The FDA, most of the governors at the FDA are political appointees. They tend to come from the pharmaceutical industry, or they are greatly influenced by the pharmaceutical industry. And I think that is a major conflict of interest. And how can you have a government agency whose responsibility to the voters and to the taxpayers to make sure that their drugs are safe and a major contributing to their well-being and health when they are influenced by the very people that make money off of them? So I agree with the Democratic side of the ticket who are criticizing drug manufacturers. And I can tell you, if it were not for assistance programs that I am on, last year in 2015, my state and federal assistance paid $108,000 for my medication. And those medications are truly miracle drugs that have made my life bearable and have made me healthy. My HIV status for the last 5 years is what's known as non-detectable. My T cells are at normal levels. I have no HIV side effects, and I have never had AIDS in my life, thanks to excellent medical care and this particular medication. However, that one medication costs regularly between $4,700 and $5,000 a month for excellent medical care. Excuse me, for a 30-day supply. And if it weren't for assistance, how could anyone afford a drug that saves their life? And that's not fair. And $5,000.
And certainly, it's become one of the major factors in this campaign is how people are dealing with healthcare and how exactly are we going to pay for all of it. And you've hit on some of that already right there. If the price of medications is certainly through the roof on things. The question is there anybody who can actually find a solution to that that's running at the moment?
Well, my point is this: as long as you have career politicians who are being bought and paid for by pharmaceutical lobbyists, you're not going to solve this problem, whether you're Republican or Democrat. They buy into both sides of the aisle so that whoever wins, they've got the upper hand. With our campaign, we have the historical moniker of, even though I am the declared candidate for the campaign, on Memorial Day last year when I declared my candidacy, I swore and I continue to uphold the vow that I will not accept the office. Now, what that means is that if my campaign wins, or our campaign wins, and I refuse to accept the office, we face a constitutional crisis that requires a new election. This gives the American people the opportunity to vote none of the above, because they're not voting for me, they're voting for themselves and voting against the other two guys. Only one state in the country, Nevada, has none of the above as an option on the ballot. The other 49 states, because of partisan control, will not allow that to happen. So we found a loophole. I throw my name into the ring, but I refuse to accept the office. So essentially, people who vote for me aren't voting for me, they're voting for the campaign and voting for none of the above. And by saying that, our campaign has no ties to lobbyists. We have a strict campaign proposal in our platform called America Now that you can download for free. It's 68 pages and over 10,000 words on our campaign proposals. And one of the things that we strictly outline there is strict guidelines on how to get the lobbyists and big money out of our politics. One way that we encourage and strongly endorse term limitations so that career politicians can no longer be bought and paid for over long term by lobbyists. And we also agree with some of the campaign rhetoric that is calling for revision of campaign finance laws, because the laws that are written now are written by the very people they're sworn to protect, and that's not what needs to be done.
Very much so. Yes, there
revision
seems to be an
of
awful lot
campaign
going
finance
on,
laws,
and there are
because the laws that
there's
are
not
written
really a
now
good solution,
are
and
written by
really
very
the none of the
people
above
who want to
option
protect.
becomes
And that's not what needs to be done.
increasingly attractive at this point, particularly looking between,
so.
you're talking about people who are fairly on, and
Because the laws that
there's
are
not
written
really
now
a good solution. Well, people tell you to go to the left, people tell you to go to the right, and there's not really much else to go with in there besides extremes. And yeah, we need something different that's working for that. Because
exactly
things to be faced with. People tell you
one of the things that we're looking at past the election. Let's face reality. It is a long shot that our campaign will win, because we're fighting the massive financial and political power of both the Democratic and Republican parties. I admit that, and I'll be realistic about that. However, our campaign really does set the tone and start a grassroots political revolution in this country, leading up to the 2020 census, where we increase public awareness and public outcry for independent redistricting commissions, or IRCs. At the moment, Arizona and California are the only two states in the country that have these. The other 48 states, the independent redistricting legislative, your legislature, whichever party controls the majority of your legislatures, controls the redistricting in the year of a census. Therefore, they can set up the redistricting commission so that their party can gerrymander and rig seats and have safe seats. In the 2012 congressional election, of the 435 seats being run in the House, 35 were considered competitive. The other 400 were all considered safe seats. Now that explains why we have dysfunction and gridlock, because the same people get elected all the time. Our campaign is going to really focus on the American people's opportunity to start electing independently minded, centrist candidates who are not going with either party. We put country before party, not party before country. The American people's opportunity.
Well, what realistically do you see is going to be happening to America if things continue the way that they are currently headed?
I'll be very honest with you, and I know I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for saying this. Donald Trump strikes me, if he wins the Republican nomination, becomes president of the United States, I honestly see a far-right wing swing in this country of cataclysmic proportions. I have never said this in my entire 30-plus years of political experience, but I feel that Donald Trump is the closest thing this country has seen to a demagogue like Adolf Hitler since Huey Long. Now, as far as Hillary Clinton is concerned, I honestly believe, despite Bernie Sanders' popularity and his revolutionary zeal appeal, I believe Hillary's going to get the Democratic nomination. The Clinton campaign machine is extremely powerful. They're very well organized. And when you get past New Hampshire and you get into South Carolina, Nevada, and the rest of the country in the primaries, her campaign is more organized than Bernie's. So I see it's going to be either Cruz and Trump into South Carolina on the Republican side, or Hillary on the Democrat. If Hillary gets it, you have to question, as so many people do now, even in the Democratic Party, her honesty regarding the emails, regarding Benghazi, and is this the person we want representing the American people? Can we honestly believe what she tells us? So you've got the lesser of two evils here. And that's the reason I jumped into this race, is because I believe the American people deserve better than that. Representing the American people.
That seems more apparent now than just about any campaign we've had, well, certainly in my lifetime, on things there. Literally, there is no really good answer that we can get to.
No, there's not. And that's the reason I jumped in this election. And my whole attitude is this. If I, openly gay, obviously physically challenged individual in a wheelchair, is willing and gutsy enough to put his life and his reputation on the line and jump into the presidential race, having never served in elected office before, my whole purpose is to galvanize the American people to stand up, reassert their rights, and regain control of their democracy by fighting partisan interest and special interests that control them. And I agree with what Bernie says. We no longer need to have billionaires running for president. I'm running this whole campaign. I tell you now, Kevin, I've raised $40 for my campaign.
And I agree with what Bernie says.
The rest of this I'm spending out of my disability income. And that's the reason, you know, I can't afford TV ads. I can't afford radio ads. I'm doing all online on a shoestring campaign staff. And I firmly believe that the American people can do exactly what the Egyptian people did. The Egyptian people used their cell phones to overthrow a dictator. Why can't the American people use online communications and social media to overthrow this partisan-controlled bureaucracy? And that's what I'm advocating.
The dictator.
Absolutely. We have more tools available to us now than anyone in history, and we have just a matter of trying to figure out how to use them correctly to be able to achieve that. What would you recommend people do first for that? Absolutely. We have more tools available to us.
The first thing I would recommend is they go to our campaign website at tomufert.org, and you can see everything that's laid out there. Our full campaign platform, our videos, me in these town halls. We do 2 town halls a month. This month we're actually doing 3. We're doing 2 today, Monday, the day before the New Hampshire primary. We're doing another one at the end of the month. And we'll be doing 2 of those until the end of the election. So people come and they can ask me direct questions. That's the whole point of this. The second thing is the American people need to realize that the primary system is rigged. Okay? People come, they can ask me, you have, that's the whole, look at the Iowa caucuses. When you consider that 185,000 people out of the 700,000 registered voters in Iowa were the ones that picked the 2 nominee winners in Iowa, what does that tell you? That 100,000, that a very select few group of people are picking your presidential candidate, and they're picking the lesser of 2 evils for you. Where's the democracy in that? So our campaign, looking past the election, are picking that we're already putting in the works. Is we're going to start an independent revolution in this country. 65% of American voters consider themselves independents. Well, if that's true, why can't we have an independent caucus and primary system? Because the way the system's rigged now, no independent candidate can put their hat out there for voters to vote on in the primary system. And like in Iowa, if you're an independent voter, you have to register as a Republican or a Democrat to participate. That's not democratic as far as I'm concerned, and I think most of the American people would agree. Primary system.
Certainly, there's a lot of people that would be saying that right now is the election for the insurgent, for the person who is not normally part of the 2 big parties going for us. I mean, we have Trump in front there. We've got Bernie making huge towards the Democratic Party that really is way beyond what everybody ever thought he would be able to do with that. And that's a lot of times what the students vote for that. So we are certainly looking at a historic election coming up here of people who are not expected to be there. And Cruz, too, he's not really expected to be in the top of that either.
Well, and you know, this is the argument that I make. I've made in several of my we do a weekly press release now. And the press release that I wrote last week and this past week, which are getting 2,000 hits at a time, stress the point that even though these candidates declare themselves as insurgent or non-establishment or outsiders, look at every one of them. Every one of them is either a former politician, a career politician, or in Donald Trump's case, and Carly Fiorina's case, these are individuals who have been working within the financial system that buys and pays for our politicians every election season. So they're just as much as insiders as the career politicians are. Our campaign is the only one. Now, Bernie says he doesn't have a super PAC. Neither does our campaign. Our campaign, however, limits personal contributions to $100. So every voter has the same opportunity, no more so than any other, We do not accept PAC money. We do not accept corporate money. And we're the only campaign that at the end of the election, if there's any money left over, we've promised to turn it over and give to charities that house the homeless, feed the hungry, and take care of our veterans. I've challenged every other campaign to do the same, and not one has accepted. So if that's not honesty, integrity, and based on everything that I've been open and honest about my life, if they want honesty and integrity, I challenge any other candidate and their campaign to do the same. So if that's not honesty, integrity,
Very much so. It would
based on
be
everything that I've been open and
very
honest
novel
about my
for
life,
everyone to actually stand
if
up and
they
be able to
want
do that
honesty
as
and integrity,
politicians, to actually
I
take that
challenge
kind of a
any
note.
other
That would be a
candidate
beautiful
and their
thing.
campaign to do the same. So if
We're
that's
looking
not
at things
honesty
there
and
that's
integrity,
been questioned
based
here.
on
Is
everything
it
that
really
I've been
right
open
for
and
you to
honest
take
about
votes
my
away
life,
from more
if
able-bodied
they want
candidates?
honesty
And that's kind of in the same vein of what you're talking about there. That would be a beautiful thing.
That's a good question, and it's a legitimate question. My point is this: if you consider the candidates that are running as legitimate candidates, they're the same people that have brought us division, gridlock, and dysfunction for the last several decades. And if that's what you want, vote for them. I am trying to take votes away from these people because they're the very people that have brought this country to its knees. And they are being bought and paid for by special interests. They are putting party before country and their own personal careers before their constituents. Our campaign does none of that. So if they argue that, yes, I'm taking votes away from legitimate candidates, I would say yes, and I'm proud to do so. Our campaign does none of
Very
that.
good.
So if they argue that, yes, I'm
Assuming
taking
that
votes
you were
away
to
from
actually make some serious
legitimate
headway with
candidates,
the grassroots type
I
of a
would say
movement here
yes,
of getting
and
people
I'm
to
proud to do
respond
so.
and to want to go with a none of the above type of a
Our campaign
situation,
does none of that.
what do you
So,
see happening come post-November?
that
You were to actually make some serious headway.
What I actually see is if our campaign wins and it creates a constitutional crisis, now I can guarantee you that both the Democrats and the Republicans would put forth judicial challenges to that premise. That's the reason I say that it creates a constitutional crisis that only the courts can settle. And I don't know where that would lead. However, I think it would send a resounding call to both parties and to the political establishment. The American people have truly had enough. And if someone who has never held elected office, who does not have a PAC or a super PAC, and is running his campaign out of his office, at his home, from his wheelchair, and is open about being gay, physically challenged, and as past as I have, can force that kind of a challenge, what does that tell the system? It says the American people have had enough, and that none of that really matters to them. What matters to them is their ability to force change. And none of the candidates in the Democratic or Republican parties really represent real change. When Bernie Sanders says, "Do you want to start a revolution?" If he wanted to start a revolution, he should have run as an independent, not as a Democrat. And when he says he wants to be radical, well, he's not being radical. He's running within the same two-party guidelines. My campaign is radical and revolutionary because it doesn't run within those guidelines. And when he says he wants to be radical,
very true, and
he's
we're
not being
getting
radical.
well with Bernie's
within
entire
the
campaign.
same
He's been working a
two-party
lot with
guidelines.
students and a lot
My
with
campaign
university
is
folks that are
radical and
looking
revolutionary
for
because it
a
doesn't run
real
within
change to this country, and he's basically offering them to get a democratic type of an answer to it instead of something that is truly revolutionary to it. What do you think that you could tell to students everywhere that are very actively wanting to get change? How can they make a change themselves where they are? Certainly being able to support the campaign for you, but how can they make a difference?
They can make a big difference. I've been involved in politics since I was 17 years old, and I can definitely tell you that being involved in a political campaign is the most rewarding, educational, and enlightening experience in being a educated and as informed and involved citizen as you can be in this country. That's how they get involved. Now, look, I'm not saying I have all the answers, and far from it. I'm probably one of the few candidates that will be honest with you and say, I don't have all the answers. I need the American people to come together with me and help us all together find the answers. Young people today, they want change, and they want the kind of diversity that this country has always stood for, and whether they've actually acted on it, it's taken centuries for us to do that, to get to a more, as the Lincoln quote, closer to a more perfect union. And we're doing that every decade and every generation. But here's what I would say to young people. If you really believe in change and you really want revolution, I admire Bernie Sanders. I respect him a great deal. But voting for another Democrat with his, I would say, who's going to have to fight the intransigence in Congress, he's not going to be able to accomplish it. What we need is a centrist candidate, and we need a revolutionary attack on the two-party system that basically shocks and rocks the boat to its very core. And that's where young people can get involved with our campaign, and start push the system to allow none of the above. Because I tell you, in the countries where they've had none of the above, it has rocked their political systems to the core. In Russia, they had it for 8 years, and the ruling oligarchy got rid of it because they kept getting voted out of office. They changed the Constitution. And I think that America needs to try something different. I mean, Albert Einstein is supposed to have said that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is lunacy. Well, that's what we're doing. We keep voting for Democrats or Republicans. We go from one side to the other every so-odd election cycle, and we're not getting any different results because they're too partisan and there's so much polarization between the two. Why not try something new? And that's what our campaign offers, a completely new perspective and approach. And we're not getting any different results.
Certainly, and with all of the social media and all of the just
between the two,
interconnectedness of through the internet and everything that everyone has nowadays, we have the ability to go beyond two parties. And the question is two parties even something that we should legitimately even be pursuing at this point? Because it's kind of a leftover piece of politics from literally decades ago, if not longer. To go beyond two parties. The question
I would tend to agree with you. Now, don't get me wrong. I have worked very heavily in the Republican Party. I started out as a Reagan Republican. I worked very heavily. I have worked on the Democrat Party for Democratic candidates. I respect the ideals and the principles of both parties. However, the fact, as my former mentor, I have worked in the Democrat Party for Democratic former political boss, Charles Benny Romer, congressman, governor, and 2012 presidential candidate, said both parties are hitched at the same wallet. So it doesn't matter whether you vote Republican or Democrat, they're both bought and paid for by the same special interests. Now, what I would argue is this, that while you can believe in both parties, and that has its historical resonance and narrative that people are comfortable with, there's nothing wrong and there's nothing antisocial or communist or socialist or fascist or anything about supporting an independent candidacy that offers the American people the chance to say, we don't like either one of them, so we're voting for none of them. You know, it goes back to the movie from the 80s, Brewster's Millions, with, I can't remember the actor's name. We don't like either one of them. We're voting for none of them. Do you remember what I'm talking about, Kevin?
Yes, I know. I'm trying to remember who was running, 80s, who was in
Brewster's Millions. With, oh God, I can see his face. Like either one of them. We're voting for none of them. Do you remember what I'm talking about, Kevin?
Yeah, it's not like a John Candy or somebody, but it's a. I'm trying to remember.
It was a black actor.
I'm sorry. Yes,
see his face.
Richard Pryor, wasn't it?
Richard Pryor. Yes, thank you. And my mind just went blank. Anyway,
John Candy.
there's a perfect example there. Black actor, someone who forces a new election And both of the candidates that were crooked and calling each other names left and right, and here was a man who didn't want the office, and the people voted for none of the above. Why can't we do that on a national basis? Why can't we send shockwaves and ripples to the entire political system that we've had enough and we don't like either of the candidates because, as I've said, they're the lesser of two evils. When you have 65% of the American people poll saying they don't trust Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, who should you vote for? Either of the candidates. Because
very true. That is the crisis that seems to be facing people at this point. Is we don't really know who you can trust because neither one seems to be anybody that really responds to the average voter out there. They have special interest or they have their own interests in mind. That is the crisis that seems to be facing people at this point. Is we don't really know who you can trust because neither one seems to be anybody that.
So what's next, Kevin?
We had a few general type of questions down here for you.
All right.
One deal. How do you feel about the problem America is facing when it comes to the growing homeless population?
So what's next? I think it's a major problem. I talk to people on several of the outlets that I am associated with. My weekly radio program on APRI Broadcasting every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Central. There have been several shows that we've talked about the homeless problem. Being a gay person, openly gay person, it was a shock to me to find out that a significant percentage of homeless people in this country are either are LGBTQ individuals or veterans. And in both cases, that's a disgrace. We have the richest country in the world, and we're not taking care of these people. And what I am encouraged by is the fact that people are getting involved with their local boards, their local charities, and doing it from a community perspective. Because let's face it, the government is overwhelmed. Politicians really don't give a damn except if it helps them get elected. And we don't have enough of the community spirit that we used to have. Churches and charities are overwhelmed. And it takes us caring for each other as brothers and sisters. And that's what I'm encouraged by in some of these local communities where people really do reach out and they don't give people it takes a helping hand. They give them an uplifting hand. And, you know, it's not about charity. What it's about is if you were in the same boat, you'd want someone to help you. And let's face it, most of the people in this country, especially with the dwindling middle class, we are one health emergency or one major unemployment situation away from being homeless. And that's a scary state of affairs for this country. And we need to do a better job of dealing with it. And we need to start at the community level and build up. Away from being homeless.
Absolutely.
And that's a scary state of
It does
affairs
bring in the
for us.
question there for where do you stand for the thousands of illegals that are pouring over the border every single day? We're talking about communities pulling together. What about the influx of new people into the country?
Okay, let's start straight and right out from the beginning. Donald Trump's Great Wall of Trump is a joke, okay? I can point to endless statistics, endless facts and figures that shows that every attempt to build a wall like Donald Trump is declaring across the southern border is impossible because of the topography of the ground, okay? There are pictures of wall sections where they have built that have fallen apart that a car can drive right through. When you talk about the electronic systems that we have contracted companies to increase our surveillance of the border, the company that the government contracted to do this went over budget by $1.2 billion, and they had to cancel the contract. So I'm very concerned when we have this xenophobic rhetoric coming out of Donald Trump. This is not what this country stands for. The Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor is what this country stands for. Now, having said that, okay, everyone has a right to be concerned about the influx of illegal aliens into this country. I would challenge people to go online and find the statistics for themselves. In the last 3 years, the net increase of illegal aliens in this country is at net zero because of the amount of deportations and the increased amount of protection that has been added to the border. That's not to say that the border isn't porous. It's not to say that it's perfect, because it's not. Part of our problem is we have to deal with the immigration problem here at home. And I believe that the e-verification system needs to be permanent and national. If you have an employer that hires an illegal alien, they need to be fined and go to jail for it. That's simple. Now, when you look at, also, there is a pay for visa program that is not highly publicized. If an employer wants to hire an illegal alien, they pay the fee for them to get a worker's visa. That's fine. Let them do that. Also, the H-1 visas in this country, there's H-1A, H-1B. One is for agricultural and blue collar, and one is for technical labor. Also, those quotas have not been updated in 20 years. That's Congress's problem. The other problem is this country has not upgraded its international quotas for refugees and updated in 20 national. That's Congress's the other number of immigrants from countries in almost 25 years. That's Congress's. We've been talking about immigration reform for 3 decades and have gotten nowhere. And that's the scary part about it. That's what I'm saying. We keep electing the same jerks back into office, and they're not going to do anything as long as we keep doing that. And so the American people need to wake up and get off their butts, excuse my French, and start electing some real people who are more concerned about doing their job than keeping their job. And that's where immigration reform comes in. We have to start here at home before we start pointing fingers abroad. Start electing some real people.
Very much so. And speaking of the overall international scene, what would you say? Why would you say America is falling behind other superpowers?
Well, let's be first. We are the only economic, military superpower in the world. There's no doubt about that. However, there are other countries that are challenging that position. China economically and militarily. The bases that they're building in the South China Sea. North Korea with its advances in nuclear technology. Russia with its military expansionism in Ukraine and reinforcing its only warm water port in the Mediterranean in Syria and upholding the Assad regime. These are all countries that we need to be very concerned about. And you look at what's going on between the Sunni and the Shiite regimes of Saudi Arabia and Iran, and how it's tearing apart the Middle East, not to mention the power vacuum that we created ourselves. We went into Iraq and we won the war, but we failed to win the peace, okay? And the red line we drew in Syria that we didn't reinforce. All of these things are problems. But I think the major thing that we need to focus on is playing it smart. We can no longer count on our military to just send 100,000, 200,000 troops in to solve every problem. Those days are long gone. If anything, the Bush-Cheney fiasco in Iraq proved that. So what we need to do is use our special operations forces, and our campaign goes into a great detail. We are proposing between 8 and 10 special operations units, similar to what the Obama administration enacted, and they did it after we made our proposal. So it makes me wonder if they didn't see our proposal and say, "Hey, this looks like a good idea." But we're proposing that we take 8 to 10 special operations units. We put 1 in Turkey, we put 1 in Jordan, we put 2 in Iraq, we put 1 in Saudi Arabia, we put 1 in Tunisia, we put 1 in Egypt, and we put 2 in naval detachments, one in the Mediterranean and one in the Gulf, that can strike at a moment's notice. And the way we fight ISIS and these other Islamic jihadists, and that's a whole nother discussion that we get into on whether you call them Islamic jihadists or what. I prefer to call them just murderers, terrorists, and I don't care what religion they are. The point is they're out to kill anybody that doesn't agree with them. So religion has nothing to do with it. They're trying to hijack Islam for their own benefits. But I digress. We propose that we put 8 to 10 of these units out there, and we strike them the way they're striking us, as guerrilla units. We go in, we hit them, we get out. And these units have 2 other folded purposes. One is to help train and educate the countries where they are, help with their special operations units, which helps build the consensus with our Arab allies that we're in there for the long haul and that we are putting money where our mouth is. And thirdly, it helps build America's reputation as being involved in the fight rather than going in and running home. Money where our mouth is.
Yes, that would be a pleasant way to make sure that we are improving the image of America. It's been said that recently, particularly with Obama, that he's been trying to gradually not make America the superpower of the world. And is that a situation that we should aspire to, or should we try and maintain being dominant in that? It's been said that recently, particularly...
Well, here's my opinion. If anything that the Obama administration has proven, leading from behind does not work. Okay? Libya is a perfect example of that. Now, I admire the president for standing up, and at once he's been called an apologist, okay? Let's face reality. There have been times in American history where we've not necessarily been the good guys, okay? We've made mistakes, as every country does. I'm not going to apologize for that. What I am going to say is it's time for us to be realistic and smart about it. And realize the rest of the world does not think the way we do, okay? Russia is a perfect example. The Soviet Union fell, and everyone thought that because there was a McDonald's in Red Square, democracy was going to flourish overnight. Well, let's face it, that hasn't happened, okay? And the same thing is going to happen in Libya, Syria, and all of these other countries where the Arab Spring happened. Just because we're out there waving the American flag and we're handing out free food doesn't mean these people are going to suddenly accept democracy. They haven't had democracy in their entire historical, cultural, and political histories. How can we expect that to happen overnight? What America has to do is be more smart. And I believe that we need to use our diplomacy and build international coalitions. That I agree with. At the same time, we can't allow our military to shrink and dwindle as it has. Now, that doesn't mean we need to have a large standing army, like a draft or anything like that. But it does mean that we need to be able to use smart intelligence, and we need to reinforce interpersonal intelligence for our intelligence agencies, which we've let decline. We need to do a better job with our infrastructure and cyber communications, because we're letting ISIS win the cyber battle online, and that's deplorable. We're not using our technology industries like in Silicon Valley and the new nanotechnology that they're doing on Manhattan, on the island of Manhattan, Silicon Valley, and we need to put all of that to work to help our campaign against ISIS, and we're not doing a very good job with that. Now, the Obama administration has made several mistakes, and I would argue that part of that is because when you've only served in the Senate for 2 years and then you become president, you lack a degree of experience to be president of the United States. I think that accounts also for Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, and I don't think we need to go down that road again. That's another reason why I say, look, I say I'm running for president, but I'm not going to accept the office. I've never held elected office. Donald Trump has never held elected office. I don't think either one of us is qualified to be president of the United States. But I do think the American people are qualified to choose and have a better choice, and that's what our campaign's all about.
Very good.
I don't think
So wrapping
either one
everything
of
up
us is
more or less here,
qualified
what do you
to
feel would be
president of
the
United States.
smartest thing that we
But I
can
do
do
think
as
the
Americans
American
now?
people are qualified to choose. Are you referring domestically or internationally or both?
It's pretty much across the board, I think. So wrapping everything up more or less here, what do you feel would be the smartest thing that we can do as Americans now?
I think the smartest thing that the American people can do, I started a hashtag sign called GIGI. Get informed, get involved. The American people have sat on the sidelines far too long and have allowed career politicians to conduct the business of government at their own leisure. And the American people are not being involved. They're not being informed. And let's face it, all you have to do is look at the declining educational skills in our country, the declining economic capabilities of a dwindling middle class. And if there's anything that the 2007, 2008, 2009 economic crisis demonstrated, is this country is in a major transition. You have this country is no longer an industrial revolutionized country. We are in informational revolution, and we are not educating our people well enough. That's the reason one of the things our campaign advocates is that we put vocational training back in the schools. There are some kids, I think every kid deserves the opportunity to go to college, but some people's brains are not geared that way. I'm not very blue collar or technical. I am more cerebral. I'll admit that, okay? I'm a brainiac. But there are a lot of people who have the skills that are better suited for blue collar and skill set with their hands than I am. And we need to put vocational training back into the schools for that. So that's domestically. Internationally, I think we need to do a smarter and more concentrated job of fighting these terrorists, whether you want to call them Islamic terrorists, whether you want to call them jihadist terrorists, I don't care. They're all terrorists, and they're out to turn religion against religion and culture against culture, and all they're interested in is power. And they're no different than any other thugs or murderers or terrorists. And I think it's time that we did a better job, and we need to put our military in charge of that. And we need to do a better job of getting our cyber our cyber industry involved in fighting that online, which we're not doing at all. And I hope I haven't beleaguered the point, but we have so many problems in this country. We need serious people to handle them. And I don't think any of the candidates running are serious enough, and the American people deserve a better choice. But we have so many problems in this country.
Yeah, definitely do need a better choice to that. And to wrap things up on this, can you tell us again how folks can learn more about you, what the website is for it?
The website for the campaign is at tomufert.org. You can also go and get a free download of our 68-page campaign platform at americanow.com. And you can find our campaign, Tom Ufert for President 2016, on Facebook. We're on just about every social media platform. We have 2 Google Town Halls like these a month on Google+. My radio program, Tom's Take, is on APRI Broadcasting. You can read my monthly column, Politics Today, in Divine Magazine. And you can see all of our videos on YouTube at Tom Ufert for President or Tom Ufert.
Very good. So lots of room for people to get involved out there with Tom Ufert, with tomufert.org, being able to take a look at that, and most importantly, to get out there and vote none of the above this November.
That's right.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate your time for taking this.
Kevin, thank you for hosting, and I appreciate you moderating. And thanks, everybody, for participating tonight. Thank you very much. And please, people, get out there and vote. We need you. Your country needs you. Thank you.
Thank you much, Tom.
Kevin, thank you for hosting, and